I'm Tom Gray, Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Legalized Gambling, and it is good to be in Nebraska, where a battle is looming, an election on whether to bring casino gambling into this state. And we can think of no one that we'd rather have a conversation with about that than Warren Buffett, who has, over the years, earned the respect not just of Nebraskans, but people in the United States for his ability to look at the economics of the country and to build really on the solid ground. Warren, it's good to be with you, and thank you for sharing with us today.
We're glad to have you in Nebraska, Tom.
Well, how is it that we come to this point? This is the third historical wave of gambling in America, and it's sort of had a boom-bust cycle, and it's in the boom cycle now. And it seems to me that you've been able to have an overview, and would you share with us some of the insights you might have?
Well, I get insights every day as to what gambling does. Incidentally, I've bet on my golf game, and it's cost me money over the years, so it isn't like I've never placed a wager. But I get dozens of letters almost daily from people who have financial difficulties for one reason or another. And the reasons overwhelmingly come from three sources. One is health problems. People run into unexpected medical bills, and it gets them in a tough situation. Second, they get in trouble on credit cards frequently, and a credit card is a temptation to many people. But the third thing I hear about is people that have had an addiction to gambling, and where they've used thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that the family needs, and they can't get off the hook, and they find themselves in enormous financial trouble. Sometimes that interacts with the credit card situation because they use their credit cards to defer bills and use their cash to feed the casinos. So I've seen just time after time the kind of misery that these people write me about. And incidentally, I get a lot of letters from prisoners too. I seem to be a favorite pen pal of a lot of prisoners. And I got one the other day, for example, where a fellow had stolen, this was extreme, but he'd stolen $2.2 million from his employer to feed a gambling addiction. And he acknowledged it, and he said he was going to spend his time in prison for it. So I think we'll always have some of that. But I think for the state of Nebraska particularly, the state I love, and my family's been here since the 1860s, I think for the state to essentially prey upon its citizens, create more of these addictions, create more of these letters coming to me every day, I just think it's wrong. I don't think, I think it's cynical on the part of the state to raise money from people who basically can't afford it by promising them a dream that is not going to come true for any but the tiniest fraction of the people that participate, and to cause people to get into the kind of trouble that I hear about every day.
You know, I think it's interesting when you talk about it out of the pain that you have felt, because government has promoted this as a painless revenue stream. Only the willing are doing it, and it seems to me that that somewhat is untruthful at its best, and at its worst, it's very cynical to do that. Another promise that's made is that it's economic development.
There's nothing getting developed. It's a transfer of money. I mean, basically, if you take the losses of everybody that participates in gambling, and it's not gaming, it's gambling. If you take the losses, it will end up going three places. It will end up going to the state as taxes to some degree. That's not development. It will end up paying part of the operating expenses of the operation, but any place you spent the money would pay part of the operating expenses of that establishment, and it'll go to the owners. And I get some kick out of this. Keep the money in Nebraska, a name attached to people who want to bring casinos here, because there are two propositions out there, and the greatest amount of funds for each one of them promoting them is coming from institutions in Nevada. And if I ever go out to Nevada and start running campaigns and say, let's keep the money in Nevada and put a lot of money in it, believe me, Nevadans should look at me twice, because that's not what I'm all about.
Now you mentioned if we follow the money and if we do the math, you mean the players are losers.
Yeah, well, I mean, just assume that Nebraska had this and our Nebraska citizens overall lost $100 million. Well, I think in one of the propositions, there's 35% of the first 15 million and 20% of the next money goes to the state. So some of the money will go to the state. That's just like a tax, basically. That comes right out of the citizenry. That doesn't do any development at all. Some of the money will go for operations, and the rest of the money will go for profits. And the sponsors of both of these are out-of-state corporations. So you're not talking about development for Nebraska when you talk about transferring money to Nevada and the state.
And could there be a corollary? We seem to see a pattern. This is disposable money. I didn't notice when I came into Omaha that you had trees growing with gambling money. Could it have an effect then on taking money out of the local economy that might then not be spent on other items?
Well, if Nebraskans lose, just pick a figure, 100 million, casinos come in, the number would undoubtedly be larger than that based on Iowa. But if they lose 100 million, I mean, that's 100 million they don't have to spend on food and toys for their children and movies and everything else. I mean, those are the letters I get. These are people that have been tapped out. It's all gone. In many cases, they've run up balances on their credit cards. And frankly, when I write these people back, I often advise them just to take bankruptcy. I mean, they don't really have an alternative. They're in so deep. And the position of the state of Nebraska should not be to create a whole lot more people that are in that position.
It seems to me that we've got then a product that's addictive in nature, that creates a certain pain and a cost to that leads to bankruptcies, and oftentimes prison correspondence would mean that there's crime involved.
Addictions produce crime. I mean, addictions produce crime. Not every case, but if you have a large group of people that are addicted to drugs, you're going to have more crime. If you have a large group of people that are addicted to gambling, you're going to have more crime. People get into impossible situations when they get addicted to something like that. And some people will opt for crime, some will opt for bankruptcy, you know, some may commit suicide.
What's an amazing thing is across the nation, though, gambling has been promoted strictly on its benefits. There is no mention of the addiction, the bankruptcy.
Well, there's a lot of benefit to the owner. I mean, and there's the occasional lucky person. But for every lucky person, there's hundreds of thousands that just keep feeding the kitty. And net, it's a big loser for the citizenry.
You know, my sense is that you understand money, you